The nice thing about the hammer too is like just innately feels physical as you just crush things.
Yeah,
I gotta say, I'm a huge sucker for a heavy hammer in a video game. So the fact that Quill's wielding one so effectively is very exciting. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to PlayStation Underground. You got Tim here, and I'm joined by Justin.
Greetings.
Hello, sir. And we're so excited to be checking out Moss Book 2, PSVR title, and especially excited to be joined by Josh Stixma, who is a principal engineer and design director at Polyarc. Hello, Josh.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. So please, off the bat, tell us what we're checking out here in Moss Book 2. I see sweet Quill here on screen.
Yeah, so Moss Book 2, we're continuing the story right where Moss left off. You met Quill, that's this great little mouse hero here. You went on a hero's journey, you found and saved her uncle. Some spoilers there, and now, we're showing a little bit of some of what might happen next in Moss Book 2.
I was a big fan of the first game. It was one of PSVR's early hits, and I'm really excited to see what you guys are able to do now that you've got kind of the first game under your belt. And now you can really spread your wings a little bit and have some fun with it. What are some of the biggest things that you're able to do in Moss Book 2 that you couldn't in the first game?
Yeah, well, we really felt like we laid a good, solid foundation for like the first game, and we really wanted to just build upon that. So, we looked at the game, we said we want to have more interactions. We want to be able to reach into the world and interact with Quill directly more. We want to have more varied types of interactions. And what you're going to see in a little bit of this room actually is one of the new interactions you've got previously. We're actually starting about this video is maybe a few chapters into the game, and you've actually unlocked one of the new abilities that you're going to have in the game. And you're going to see here a very different kind of texture to what we had in the first game, where it was very much move, simple object back and forth. This is a little bit more organic.
Okay, so manipulating that vine to grow and form a bridge. Yeah,
and that'll follow your hand like wherever you go, and you've got like several different connection points, and it just gives you a quick idea of some of the types of interactions you can do in the game.
That's so cool. And obviously, this is we're looking at some pre-recorded gameplay here, and so we'll be jumping around a little bit. But Josh, can you speak a little bit about one of the goals I'm familiar with Moss Book 2 is just trying to increase that level of sort of player immersion and feeling like a part of the world, and how what we're seeing here that might be strengthening that connection.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look in the background, like where are we right now? We're actually in this giant garden that's kind of outside of the castle that you had spent largely all of Moss 1 working towards, and trying to make sure that it feels continuous and feels connected, like this large giant world, this little tiny mouse going through it. And it's pre-recorded, but we'll get glimpses of, the player here looking around and just seeing this giant environment that you're going through, and having that environment feel real and physical as you're going through it. Is a really big thing that we wanted to push on, to make players feel like we did in Moss 1, but even more, that this world is real and you can be immersed in it. And, maybe hours go by and you're like, wow, I'm still in here, and I'm still feel like I'm part of this world. And Quill is looking at me and respecting that I am part of this world, and it kind of feels that way. And we hope to try and push that as much as we can.
Nice. Now, obviously, with the first game, VR was still a really nascent technology, and I think a lot of developers were still wrapping their heads around how to develop a game for VR. But it's been a while now, and a lot of developers have learned a lot of lessons about what makes for a quality experience in VR. Is there any philosophy changes that have come about at the studio when designing a VR game compared to the first one?
Yeah, on the point of us learning how to do it, it's going to be a continual experience. And as new technology comes out, we keep finding new ways to explore a little bit more. But one of the things that we really felt worked really well for the first game was that physical interaction and reaching into the world. And we wanted to give you, as the player, more opportunities, because you're controlling Quill, and you can see here we actually did a bit of a jump ahead to another section of the game. We went from the gardens right down to this like arcane foundry that's deep in the depths, kind of just showing you a very, different environment that you're getting. It's kind of a bit of an example of some of this that we're trying to push. This is more varied world, more varied in terms of the interactions things you can grab, and in this case, we're showing things you can't grab in the world. And
did the player just try to sort of interact with that box, and did it heat up, or what did we see there?
It kind of it's kind of hexed with arcane energy, and it's a kind of thing that you can't grab. And this kind of reinforces in this way some of that visual language that the player understands, like, oh, this is stuff that I'm not going to be able to get. And speaking of something you really want to get, if you see any statues with glowing weapons in this game, you're going to want to be checking that out.
I love it. I was waiting for that. I was waiting for it to be too heavy first. That's
little
amazing.
Tiny mouse with a big heavy hammer. And we showed a little bit of this in one of the earlier trailers, but we haven't really shown like a little bit of how that works. And you experiment with it a little bit, but like, okay, that's not how I do it. How do I break these things? And we want the players to be able to explore, but also you got a new weapon now. What are some cool things that I can do with it? And this is kind of speaking to like your earlier question of what are some of the new things that we want to, that Polyarc is like, second game, we got to do this. It's like, well, we want to let Quill give you stuff you can interact with in the world. In this case, she can spawn a hammer.
Oh, that's so cool.
In this case, you're kind of holding your attack button to charge it, and then she leaves it up to you to reach in and grab that, and that can kind of create new opportunities for puzzles, but also combat.
Nice.
It's so cool, and strengthening, the connection between you and Quill, kind of feeling like you're cooperatively, making your way through this world together. I think
you can
that's
see
so
here,
cool.
this is just another really cool environment. The artist did a great job bringing this dangerous foundry. This is like an arcane foundry underneath actually the depths of the castle to life. And you can see a little bit here, there's now a bit more strategy of, I've got this weapon, but I actually need to use this special ability, similar to how you couldn't interact with those boxes. It's kind of that same visual language on these enemies. These screechers here, we actually call them armored screechers. You're actually going to be able to need to work together in combat to take these enemies down, which is like a thing that we hadn't done at all before in Moss 1.
Yeah, that's awesome. It really kind of speaks to the ethos of VR, which is getting the player more immersed in the game. And in this case, you are physically interacting with this world.
Yeah, and just the nice thing about the hammer too is like just innately feels physical as you just crush things.
Yeah,
I gotta say, I'm a huge sucker for a heavy hammer in a video game. So the fact that Quill's wielding one so effectively is very exciting. I also love that extra level of coordination and player cooperation is required for like busting the armor and stuff. Like, it seems like it could add just a lot of texture to the combat.
Yeah, and you can see still, like just like in the first game, there's reason for the player to reach in and grab some of these enemies. If you're having a tough time with a certain enemy, you can like reach in and just shut them down while Quill annihilates them. And just like in the first game, sometimes reaching in and grabbing them can be of benefit because you can actually use them to fight each other. Nice. Here we're actually seeing another one of kind of the newer enemies in Moss 2, call this one the Bomber. Just kind of more like, kind of sets up like a tank from a distance and lodges these little self-destructible mines. And what Quill's trying to do here is actually hit it from the front, which actually clangs off it because he's also kind of armored from that direction. And, working together is always going to be kind of a power move to take enemies down. But there's just a lot of different strategies. And worth noting, this hammer is like one of the weapons you're going to be seeing in the game. Yeah. So we're really excited to show off some of the cool things you can do for combat, but also the cool things we can do with puzzles, because you have access to this thing. We've kind of shown like the simple, like I can get up an elevator, but also like how do I get through a more complicated traversal space and using this hammer as well.
Yeah,
so
on the note of the hammer, so you've got this new weapon now. Can you just switch weapons at any time, or like what's the mechanic for that?
You can. We're not showing it in this video here, but the player does have access to on the fly swap between the weapons that they've gained, and we're trying to keep a little bit under wraps because showing that will spoil some of the things that you're going to be unlocking.
Okay, I will pry.
But we are really excited for the player to be able to not just solve a puzzle with one weapon, but multiple weapons.
Oh, cool.
And you can kind of imagine how some of that complexity would scale with the game.
That sounds like so much fun. I love the idea of that could make, combat kind of a puzzle within itself as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, where are we now?
You can see,
so deeper in the
you
Foundry.
can see here kind of what we've been doing in this dungeon is we've been trekking forward. We know that we kind of need a key. It's kind of a little bit of the narrative that we're working with here. So we've got our hammer and we're going to blow a bunch of stuff up, go through these cool, like dangerous looking lava environments in this foundry. And we're looking to get this key and bring it back to where we need to go to progress. And we know for coming in here that there's a big baddie in here. Ooh. So we do know that if we get down to those lower levels, there's going to be something big that we're going to be contending with too. Ooh. So we're looking at, in this case, once again, that kind of dungeoning feel. Like a lot of Moss 1 was, I'm going to go through these worlds and then I'm in a bit of a dungeon and there's a lot of like kind of retraversal going back. Like players can really expect more of that in Moss Book 2. Just trying to solve puzzles together with Quill, try to figure out the right way to go. Make sure you get your scroll collectibles on the way.
Of course.
Which is what she's doing here. We're definitely
an important detour.
Absolutely. You want to make sure you get those. And you get what you need in terms of the key, and then you start on your way back to where you want to use it, and get reminded that there's definitely something bigger in here.
With a hammer as well, which may outsize Quill's a little bit, but I don't think that will stop her.
Start to think there might be a bit of a hammer battle at some point.
Well, wanted to say, that's our look at Moss Book 2 today. Josh, thank you so much for joining us here on PlayStation Underground, and look forward to the game launching this spring.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
PlayStation